In any underwater emergency, the first thing you do, if you can, is to try to reach the surface. But for me, this time, that avenue of escape was closed tight. I was down about 60 feet, and I had never felt more helpless. For the first time in my life, I was being circled by sharks when I had absolutely no weapon for protection. I had been forced to go underwater completely unarmed, without a knife, a spear gun, shark repellent, or anything else that I could use in an emergency. But what was waiting for me above was even worse than the sharks below. I had been doing some badly needed work on my boat, most of it underwater. It had been put off for weeks, and this was my day for getting it done. At least that was what I had planned. But that wasn't the way it turned out. My friend Dick Talbot, who flies an amphibian plane for the Avalon Airlines, was calling me when I came up to take a break. He had his own ideas.
Will I see you in Catalina this afternoon? I said, will I see you in Catalina this afternoon? The albacore are running, and so are the blondes.
Oh, not today, Dick. I'm gonna stay right here. Got a lot to do.
You know the old saying, never put off till tomorrow what you can put off today.
No, listen. You catch me on your way back. But not today. Not for anyone. Out.
We couldn't help but overhear your conversation, Mr. Nelson. We certainly hope you aren't going to stick to that decision entirely.
Well, I got company, huh?
Hi, Mr. Nugent. This is Mr. White, Jonas White.
Mr. Nugent, Mr. White.
We're businessmen, and it seems at this particular time we require your services, somewhat urgently.
For an enterprise of very short duration, about 3 hours of your time at the very most.
Oh, I'm sorry, gentlemen, not today.
We're willing to pay well. Let's say double your usual fee. It's something of a business emergency.
No, not today.
Well, would this help?
3 hours work? Oh, you make it kind of hard to say no. No, I couldn't. I got a big assignment coming up. Gotta do a lot to prepare.
Isn't there any way we can make you change your mind?
Surely there must be something we can do to persuade you, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, I guess there is a way.
We'll cast off immediately. Jonas, get the anchor.
I was putting out to sea against my will, but my visitors had a very convincing way about them, with guns in their hands.
I'm sure this is everything he's got aboard, Val.
This is exactly where we have to go, Mr. Nelson.
Lee side of Rogers Island? About 15 miles north of Dina Point.
Yes. Mr. White has checked all your equipment. You have 2 full tanks of air, which should give you plenty for what we have in mind.
Now, that's something I would like to know. Just what is it that you intend to do?
Mr. White and I are businessmen, as I said. Importers.
Mr. Nugent, if we were to eliminate all of this double talk, would it be a fair guess to say that what you import is narcotics, dope?
You could say that, yes. Not too often, but you could. To tell you the truth, Mr. Nelson, this trip is to pick up some merchandise which was left for us by a friendly fishing boat at a secluded spot where it was to remain undisturbed, about 60 feet down.
Mr. Nelson, neither Mr. Nugent nor I are violent people, but if we must resort to more primitive means of persuasion, we're both pretty expert. That bottle over there on your right, about 20 yards. Excuse me, Val.
I understand. One personal question, if I may.
Go ahead.
As long as I'm in on this, just what's my end of the deal?
Well, your end of it is very simple. You go down where we tell you to, and you come up with what you find. Or you don't just bother to come up at all. Yes, this would be the spot. Unless we're off a little bit, you'll be able to find it within a radius of several hundred yards.
It's a small metal watertight container painted a brilliant yellow. It's held by a small anchor and a short line.
The canister is buoyant, which means that you'll find it riding above the bottom a few feet. That should make it very easy to see. I wouldn't take too long, Mr. Nelson.
Well, I don't know, Miss Nugent. A lot of things that affect a search like this. The currents down there, the tight bottom, where there's a lot of kelp or seagrass. Even the temperature of the water.
The water temperature is 68 degrees. The bottom is sandy with very little seagrass, no kelp. There's just a mild current until the tide changes at 7:32. When you touch bottom, your depth gauge will read 58 feet. Anything else?
You already know this area, don't you? Maybe you ought to make this dive instead of me, huh?
No. You'll do better with it. Your reasons are more, shall we say, compelling.
And Mike, just in case you get any ideas, no tricks and no games. We always win them.
I took my time heading for the bottom so I could think things through. Wherever I would go, they would follow my bubbles. They had guns, I didn't. They had the boat. I had only the air in my tanks, as long as it would last. The nearest beach was miles away, on a lonely, deserted island. And the boat could head off any move that I made in that direction. There was no kelp in the area that could dissipate my telltale trail of bubbles. They had anticipated everything. How was I going to get out of this? Every direction was a blank wall. I wondered whether it mattered too much either, whether I found that container or not. If I didn't, I'd be killed. But if I did find it, wouldn't I be killed anyway? True, with the container, I had a chance of getting back on board. But wouldn't that be about all? The spot had been well selected, and the water conditions were just as Nugent had said. It was fairly small, but small as it was, it could easily hold pure, uncut narcotics worth nearly $500,000. My first inclination was to start for the surface at once and take my chances back on the boat. They'd be excited when they saw the container, and their excitement might make them careless. Or would they be excited? These were a couple of pretty cold customers. No, not so good. I considered the odds again. They had every reason to kill me, with the container or without. It's hard to deny yourself a last hope, but there was no hope here. Certainly not in delivering that container full of untold human misery. Now, there was one sure way to keep myself from weakening. Once I destroyed those narcotics, there would be no chance left for me above. If I found an answer at all, it would have to be down here, underwater. The only asset left would be a small margin of time, just as long as there was air left in my tanks. They'd have to be patient on the chance that I would produce the container. Then suddenly a small foam rubber ring slipped out of the container. In a second, it was on its way to the surface. If those men saw it when it bobbed up, I was through then and there. They'd know instantly that the container had been found and opened. They'd have no reason to wait any longer. They'd leave me to drown, or else, the moment I came up, finish me off. 2 major narcotics operators were waiting on my boat above. They expected me to bring up a container of smuggled dope worth close to $500,000. I had just destroyed the narcotics. But there was one thing that I could be certain of. I had nothing to lose by stalling. At least I thought so, until I spotted a good-sized man-eater cruising around me. Ordinarily, sharks don't worry me too much underwater. But this was the first time that I'd ever been down without a spear gun or a knife or some means of protection. Many birds and animals can tell by instinct when a man is armed and when he is not. Could sharks sense that I was unarmed? Did they have the same instinct? Could they smell the fear that was inside me? I was helpless, and I knew it. Then something else attracted their attention, and they too were gone. But for how long? I have been thinking about the sharks. They seem like a good reason to request a knife or a spear gun. Either might give me something to work with. I sent the slate up. It read, "Sharks down here. How about spear gun or knife?" The reply came down. Nugent had his own brand of humor. It read, "No. Sharks up here, too." My air was just about gone. The time had come. Now I would find out whether or not the ring of foam rubber had come up too far from the boat to be seen. I prepared a slate, telling them that to continue the search, I would need the spare set of air tanks. I asked them to slide the spare tanks, the last of my air, down the safety line to me. And I emphasized that I still hadn't found the container. If they sent down the tanks, I would know that they hadn't seen the rubber ring. Their answer was short and crisp. The slate slid right back. All it said was, "Come up." There was nothing else to do, with my air tanks practically empty. I started up toward the 2 men who, sooner or later, would kill me. If they'd already seen the rubber ring, I was as good as dead the moment my head appeared above water. Well, I'd know in a few seconds. I was in luck. Not only hadn't they seen it, but something else entirely was on their mind. An amphibian plane, which had flown by at a very high altitude and then returned.
Where's the container? I couldn't find it. Very dirty down there.
Right now we got another problem. That plane up there, it's an amphibian.
It's the same one your friend flew over the boat just before we left.
Oh,
Now get on that radio. But be sure you make everything sound very normal.
Make it really normal. He's been calling. Take it away to the tanks.
Avalon 322, come in.
This is Avalon 322. I thought that was your boat out there, Mike. What are you doing down there? I tried to get you out of port. Who you got down there is prettier than I am.
strictly business, Casanova. Something came up that I just couldn't turn down.
I'm working too. Have a charter job. Have to swing over by the Channel Islands. Maybe I'll see you coming back.
Well, I don't know what I'm gonna run into. I may not be here when you come back.
When I first saw your boat down there, I thought maybe you might be out of gas.
No, I wasn't.
Nothing I can do for you then.
No, nothing. All right, wait a minute. Call May and tell her I'll be gone all day. Out.
May? May? What May?
That'll keep her off my neck, too.
There's your spare tanks. Get them on and get going.
That water doesn't look very dirty to me.
No, it is down there.
Then I saw something that gave me an idea.
Now, this should do it.
It better.
The small white stick that I had just slipped under my air tanks was an underwater flare. It was my good luck that they hadn't known what it was, or they wouldn't have left it around. Now I had something to work with, and an idea to go with it. My first step was to take off my air tanks. I attached them to the anchor line. After taking a deep breath, I opened the valve full force so that an uninterrupted stream of bubbles would continue to rise. Now all the air I had was what filled my lungs. I had to work quickly. I moved up toward the hull. I wrapped my weight belt around the propeller. This would foul it, would keep it from turning. Then I attached the flare just below the propeller. I ignited it. By this time, my lungs were aching, so I dove for my air tanks. I knew that on a small boat, nothing inspires panic quicker than fire.
Hey, Val, we're on fire! Get the extinguisher!
Disarming White wasn't easy. He put up a good fight. Nugent had come up near the propeller shaft, and seeing the flare, knew that it was a trick. He got back on board before I could reach him. I knew that I couldn't get aboard now. I had to get away from that boat, and fast. I jettisoned my tanks to get all the speed that I could. I began swimming with all my strength in the general direction of the island. If I could reach it, I might escape. But if Nugent could start the engines before I reached that island, it'd be curtains for me. Nugent realized much too fast that the engines weren't effective. He jumped into the water and spotted the weight belt. It took him only seconds to remove it. I could hear the boat's engines in the distance getting louder. And in a moment, I was within firing range. Then I heard another sound. It was Dick in the amphibian. He had put May and Day together to get Mayday, the international distress signal. He had called the Coast Guard, and he came back to have a look for himself. He had spotted the smoke from my flare. When my pursuers saw the amphibian, they stopped firing. They turned the boat around. They had only one idea now, to get away as fast as they could. But they had no avenue of escape. We followed them closely. A patrol helicopter joined us. When a Coast Guard cutter appeared on the horizon, we knew that they'd give us no more trouble. The two businessmen who had found crime so rewarding would get their final reward. Only it would be measured in years instead of dollars.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Bridges, inviting you to join us for another action-packed story of underwater adventure 1 week from today.